Hi YouTubers, welcome back to another episode of Malcontent Corner, the corner where I hope to enlighten your lives by sharing with you things that I've learned in the daily walk of mine. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about a plumbing issue that I had and what it took to fix that issue. Coming up after the intro. Welcome back, everyone. So, as I said, I had a plumbing problem, but before I get into the nitty-gritty details of it, I kind of want to give you a layout of my house and some of the symptoms that I was having, that I was dealing with before I ended up resolving the problem. Now, the first thing you need to know is my house is an older house. It is a combination of copper piping in some sections and galvanized piping in other sections. The galvanized is obviously older. Galvanized is okay, but it does tend to rust and scale and flake and can cause problems. Copper, as far as I'm concerned, is the gold standard. I get it. There's a lot of people that swear by PEX. Don't care, don't like it. I like copper. In theory, I should go through and replace it all, but it's a big project and I have other projects to deal with. Now, one of the things that I noticed, and my wife noticed it as well, was that the kitchen sink, and not that it matters, but the faucet in the sink is one of those ubiquitous Delta faucets. It's got the one spigot out and the lever that you lift up and you can turn left or right. The hot water feed on that was drastically diminished compared to the cold water feed. It used to be good, but at some point, all of a sudden, it like dropped. And I won't say it was a trickle, but it wasn't a whole lot better than. So my wife, was really cool about it because I'm like, listen, I don't want to have to deal with this right now because I know that the hot water line that feeds this particular sink is galvanized. And I was fearful that the plumbing was plugged up, that the water supply was plugged up. So she was really cool about it. And she says, listen, deal with it after Christmas. Unfortunately, during Christmas, we got the flu, kind of took the wind out of our sails. So now, it's kind of going into January. And I tell her, okay, listen, I'm feeling better. I'll get on it next week. And I said that Sunday, the week prior. So that night, after I said I'll deal with it next week, I'm in the bathroom. I brush my teeth. I rinse out my mouth. I turn off the water. And for some reason, I had to turn the water back on. I don't remember why, but I heard the pipe water hammer. And then all of a sudden, the water coming out of the bathroom sink was greatly diminished. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Check the toilet. It's flowing fine. The shower, fine. Check the faucet on the basin in the basement. It's fine. But now I have a hot water lead in the kitchen that's running slow, and both hot and cold in the bathroom running slow. Sunday night, I don't want to deal with it, so I'm like, I'll deal with it later this week. So as the week wore on, I kind of noticed that the water pressure on the faucets, well, even the ones that were partially blocked up, it's like the water pressure was higher at first and would bleed down to a constant steady. Even if that steady was slow, but it's like, even the ones that weren't flowing as well as they should, it would come out better and then kind of bleed off. So I went downstairs and happened to take a look at the water heater tank, and I found that the pressure relief valve was actually dribbling water out of it. Now at this point, I'm wondering, okay, do I have a bad expansion tank? Those are the white propane-esque looking tanks that you'll see kind of right off. They're typically right off the water heater. There's an air bladder in there, and what that does is take up some of the pressure that might be created when the hot water tank creates its hot water. I'm thinking, is that bad? Well, let me run a test. So I broke out my water pressure testing gauge here. It looks like this. You can pick them up pretty much any hardware store. They're not incredibly expensive. And I hooked it up to the faucet in the wash basin downstairs. Now, I'm fortunate in that this particular faucet has threading on the outside, so I can screw this right into it. If you don't happen to have that, you could do a hose spigot on the outside of the house. That'll work just as well. Well, anyways, I hook it up, I turn on my cold water, and I am absolutely flabbergasted to see this thing peg out at 120 psi. I'm like, okay, things are starting to make sense right now. You know, I'm thinking, well, maybe the water pressure regulator, which I knew I had, got out of adjustment somehow. But no matter what I did to adjust that pressure, it remained at a solid 120 psi, which I know from my particular area is municipal water pressure. So I'm like, okay, my water pressure regulator isn't looking very good at this point. I also found that if I left a faucet running upstairs, didn't have to be running full blast, but just running, that by looking at this gauge, I was finding that the water pressure would then bleed off down to 60 psi. And I'm like, okay, now I know what's going on here. I don't have a complete failure of my water pressure regulator, but it's not holding the pressure when it's under load. So basically, as long as the water's flowing, it would sit at 60 psi. And from there, I could adjust it up, I could adjust it down. But the second I turned that water off, this gauge would climb till it hit about 120 psi. So now things are starting to come into focus for me, because now I'm like, I understand why the pressure relief valve on the hot water tank is dribbling water. I understand why water pressure seems higher initially and then bleeds down. I have a bad water pressure regulator. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to show you how I replaced this regulator. I've already replaced it a month or two ago. But I'm going to take you in and kind of show you where it is in my house and what I ended up doing to replace it, and give you hopefully some pointers along the way. So let's go ahead and head on in, and then we'll finish up out here in the garage again. Okay, everybody, here we are in the inside of my basement, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of what I have going on here. So right here, I have the water inlet from the water meter. I have a shutoff valve here, and it turns up and feeds into this water pressure regulator, and from there it feeds into the house. Now, I'm fortunate that I have the shutoff valve right here. A lot of homes do not have this, and if you do not have one, you have to turn the water off out by the water meter. You can pick up a special wrench for that at any of the big box hardware stores. A lot of hardware stores have them. They're not dirt cheap. I want to say they're anywhere from about $25 to $30, but you can pick them up and turn the water off out at the water meter. In my case, I have a shutoff valve here. Now, before I go cracking anything or trying to disconnect anything, I have to remember that even under the best of circumstances, the water in this line is under pressure at roughly 60 psi. So if I go ahead and just crack the nut on this union here, I'm going to end up with water going all over the place, and it'll spray out at a pretty good rate. In my case, it would be even worse because this is under pressure of 120 pounds per square inch. So if I crack that nut, I'm going to end up with a lot of water shooting out and making a horrendous wet mess out of everything. So what you need to do is you need to find a way to bleed that pressure off, which you can easily do by opening up your faucets. I open up personally both hot and cold to just bleed the pressure off. The water will end up trickling out once the water level drops and the pressure bleeds off. Now, even though the pressure is bled off, you need to be aware that these lines still have water in them. While it goes behind the styrofoam cooler here, it shoots up into this galvanized line here and wraps around. So the second I crack the nut on that union, I'm going to end up with water backfilling out of this fitting here. That is what this aluminum pan is for. This is one of those disposable aluminum pans that you can pick up at any grocery store. They're usually in the bakewares item. You know, they're pretty cheap, but I use this as a catch can, and fortunately in my case, it was enough to catch all the water. I put some towels down just to be safe, and cracked the nut on the union there, and the catch, this little aluminum pan made a nice catch basin. If you happen to have a lot of water that's coming out and this is filling up, you might want to have a bucket or some kind of receptacle handy so that maybe you can fold down one of these edges and use the bucket as an overfill. Once this was filled up, I took it out of the way, dumped it off in the sink that I have around the corner here in my basement. I was then able to take a pipe wrench and put it on this copper pipe here and one on that nut right there. And what I did was applied equal but opposite pressure to both items. So this nut is counterclockwise to loosen it. So what I did was just applied equal pressure going clockwise on this copper here, this copper segment, and on the nut going counterclockwise, so that way I was not putting undue torque on either the piping or this galvanized piece here. By doing that, once I broke the nut, I was able to loosen it up completely. The water poured out. I poured the water out. You know, was able to get in here, not have to worry about anything. I was then able to move everything a couple of inches because this pipe has a little bit of flex in it to get it out far enough to where I could then put a piece, a monkey wrench on this, or a pipe wrench on this, I should say. And there's a flat spot on this side of the body of the water pressure regulator and a flat side on the other side. And once again, applying equal but opposite pressures going in the other direction, was able to unscrew this piece and back it out. Once I had it backed out, I put new Teflon tape on. I put the new pressure regulator in there. I screwed it in, cinched it up, made it snug. Then I was able to put the gasket in the union, put the nut on, line everything up, and cinch that up. And as you see, it's in place. I put the pan in here for an example, but once it was in there, I then went around the house and basically bled all of my faucets of any air that might be trapped in the lines. You know, so in other words, I ran the kitchen sink, I ran the bathroom sink, the shower, flushed the toilet. I wanted to purge the water line of any air pockets that might be in there. After that, I was able to hook up my water pressure gauge to the faucet here in the basement, turned it on, and it was running about 68 pounds. I was able to adjust it with the fixture right there on the top of this. I got it down at 60. Everything is looking good. So with that, let's go back out to the garage and we'll wrap up out there. All right, everyone, so there you have it. I replaced that and it's in place, and I'm glad to say everything's working. Now here's the old one. Here's the water outlet. This is a female thread, and then here's the water inlet. I call this a junction. I don't know if that's actually what it is, but it has a channel here for a gasket, and then in addition to that, there is this threaded piece that actually threads onto the copper pipe that you saw, and it goes flush against that, and that giant nut holds this together. Now I'm lucky that I have this kind, because all I had to do was break this loose. Once it was loose, I could move this pipe far enough out of the way to where I could unscrew this on the female fitting here. Putting a new one on was just as simple as putting on some new Teflon tape and screwing the new one in place and putting the gasket in place and bolting it all back together. So I'm happy to say with that in place, everything is working and not dribbling and working as it should. Now, with that being said and done, I'm going to try to answer a few questions you may have here regarding something like this. Now, one of the first things that might come to mind is, how long is one of these things good for? In theory, from what I've seen online, which is no way, I would say, authoritative, but everybody I've seen online say usually about 10 to 15 years. Okay, my house, I've been in 18 years. This was here when I moved in, so it's at least 18 years old. So if it's 10 to 15 is a life expectancy, it's exceeded that life expectancy. I mean, this could be 30 years old as far as I know. I'm not sure. Now, is every one of them built like this? No. I've seen these that have female to female fittings. So hopefully if you have one of those, you have a union further up on the line where you can unbolt this and unscrew this and get it out of the way. Because obviously if it's female, as you untighten one side, it's going to tighten on the other. And, you know, that could end up in just a bad situation there. So, not every one of them is like this. Can you repair this? I say yes, and I say that with a question mark. I thought the same thing. Listen, it's brass. It's inside. It should be pretty easy to fix. But the problem is every repair kit I found for, and I wasn't even sure it was for this model. I believe it was, but I don't know if it's for this particular model, which is discontinued, by the way. They do have one similar, but it's just a new model number. But the repair kits were like anywhere from $100 to $135. So, you know, I figured out, okay, once I get tax and shipping in on it, then I got to try to pull this apart, hopefully put it together right, and hopefully the repair kit will take care of the problem. I would think it would, considering that this is indoors, considering it's this controlled environment, considering this is all brass. You should be able to replace this or repair this. But a new one at time of filming this was $155 plus tax. For me, you know, knowing the cost involved in getting a repair kit and honestly knowing my luck on some of this stuff, I just elected to replace it and go with new. It's not worth my time to fuss with this. Removing and replacing this took about 45 minutes. Pulling it apart and putting it back together could take anywhere from that amount of time to even longer. So for me, I just replaced it. Does every house have one of these? Well, I can tell you in my neighborhood, yes. And I can tell you in other neighborhoods, no. For example, my parents, their house used to be about 10 miles away from where I lived. We replaced the water feed line on that house back 50 years ago. And at that time, we just ran a new copper line from the water meter all the way into the house. There was none of this involved. Inside the house, there was nothing like this. So their house didn't need that. Down here in my neighborhood, as I said, I knew municipal water pressure is 120 psi. And I have seen, for example, my neighbor, he has one of these, and it is buried in the ground outside of his water meter. In fact, I've seen several houses in the neighborhood that have had these installed, and they're buried underground outside, about a foot outside the water meter. Are these rated to be underground? I do not know. In my case, I don't worry about it because I've got one inside the house. But you know, if you happen to put a water pressure gauge up to your water spigot and you're finding your pressures are 90, 100, 120 psi or higher, odds are you have one of these. And if you can't find it, I would ask your water department what your municipal water pressure is, and if your water coming into the house is what municipal is, odds are you have one of these somewhere, whether it's in the crawl space or in the feed line leading into the house. So, you know, it all depends. Some houses have them, some of them don't. You know, installation in my case was pretty easy. Adjustment in and of itself is pretty easy. You basically have a lock nut here and this bolt on top. The bolt does work counterintuitive to what you would think. I would think screwing clockwise and pushing this down would decrease pressure, and loosening it counterclockwise and lifting it up would increase water pressure. It's actually the opposite. To increase water pressure, you screw it down, and to decrease it, you run counterclockwise. At least if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but I seem to remember thinking, oh, that's counterintuitive to what I would think. Once I put this in, it was running a little high. I basically backed this bolt off a little bit, got it to 60 psi, locked it down, and everything is running perfect like it should. Now, with that being said, it took care of 90% of my problems, and here's what I mean about that. You know, I still had the issue of the hot water lead at the kitchen sink being slow. And what I ended up doing was I took a compressor into the house and tried forcing compressed air into the line, hoping to blow whatever was in there out. And you know, obviously the water's turned off. I'm not trying to do this under pressure. And I opened the faucets in the wash basin in the basement downstairs, and I was trying to force whatever out, only to find that once I put it all back together, water pressure on the hot water line was even worse. I was just like, oh my God. So at this point, I ended up pulling the flex line from the shutoff valve to the faucet itself out, and I found a chunk of rust sitting in the line. Now, at that point, I could have rotted the line out and probably reused it, but honestly, it was one of those nylon flex lines, And at this point, I know it is at least 18 years old and been subjected to not only overpressurization, but also years of hot water. And these lines tend to get kind of hard and brittle, and I do not want to fuss with water feed lines that are old, hard, and brittle. So at that point, I just replaced the line with a new one. And after that, I pulled, knowing there was rust in there, I pulled the little aerator off at the end of the sink, and I found it to be clogged up with some rust. I cleaned it out, and after that, I'm happy to say both hot and cold water are running fine like they should. In fact, I'm surprised the cold water was running as well as it was. Although, when I put the air in the line, I could have broke more rust through, and then when I ran the water, it could have blocked up that aerator. So, you know, it could have gone either way on that one, but in any event, because I knew there was rust in there, I just decided to clean the whole thing out. So then I headed off to the bathroom, pulled the aerator out of that, and sure enough, I found a chunk of rust in there. So I suspect that's what caused the water hammer. When I turned the water on, I have a feeling the water started running, and then the rust got in there and blocked it up, and it caused the line to herky-jerk because of the sudden pressure difference there. But, you know, did the water pressure regulator cause the rust to break loose? Well, probably not, but maybe. You don't know. 120 psi is a lot of pressure. So needless to say, I'm glad that it's 60 psi now when sitting, it's 60 psi when running, and everything is running like it should. Now, in theory, I should replace those galvanized lines, but that's going to be a project for a later date, and right now, everything is running as it should. So anyways, that's what I had going on, and that's what it took to fix it. Hopefully you found this video of some use. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a minute to subscribe to my channel. Who knows, maybe I'll touch on a subject someday that will be of use to you. But as always, I do appreciate you listening to me. I hope to see you back again here in the not too distant future. So until that time, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and we will see you later. All right? Ciao.